So President Cyril Ramaphosa says there's no clear time frame for a possible end to the rolling power cuts in the country. He said this during the ANC's Letsema campaign in Philippi over the weekend. South African households and businesses are reeling from up to stage 6 load shedding just last week. We're currently on stage 5. Let's talk about this with Thabiso Tenyane, who is an energy expert and executive chairperson of the Phakwe Group. A very good afternoon to you, sir. Grateful for your time. So the President says there's no timeline. It's impossible, really, to give a timeline at this point to ending load shedding. Where does that leave us then as far as the country's response and the citizens' preparedness, shall we say, to cope and deal with this crisis?
Look, maybe it's a blessing in disguise. I've always been saying that let's brace ourselves for a worse situation as South Africa, because the problems of Eskom that are sitting in front of us are complex, are of a long-term nature, requires a plan that we all need to rally around it. But the fleet is old. Eskom will be 100 years next year. And we have delayed the new generation capacity in South Africa for the longest time, when we had the opportunity at the time to have moved and replaced this fleet with a new fleet. Now we find ourselves in a bigger conundrum where climate change demands of us to use technologies that are less emitting, which then necessitate that 95% of our fleet needs to be decommissioned because they are coal. But how are we going to transition to any other? Because renewable is not a replacement of the current electrons in the system. You need also a mid-range, which is 16 hours of generation, and you need what we call a base load, which is 24 hours. Mm-hmm. So those cannot be replaced just by renewable. So I think we appreciate the president to now concede to the fact that, because before he came back from Egypt when it was stage 6, the second time he came back from UK when it was stage 6, I'm not sure where he went now, or he was coming back from when. So it cannot necessarily be business as normal. South Africa needs to sit, and we are happy that this coming week, much as the conference could be the contestation of the new leadership or the current leadership reconfiguring themselves, I do think that one of the hottest topics in the commission will be this load shedding problem that we are facing.
Okay, so given that then, Mr. Tenyane, what should be the goal or the ultimate objective for ANC delegates at this conference on the energy front? What would be our easiest route out of the energy crisis?
There's not going to be the easiest route, but I hope that they will take a policy decision to say we need the second utility in this country. We need the second utility. That second utility can still be government, can still be the subsidiary of Eskom, but it must only focus on new generation build. We cannot be in this situation and think that while you are experiencing breakdowns, while you are experiencing decommissioning, while you are experiencing sabotage in terms of coal delivery, while you are experiencing staff that is now resigning on the basis that they cannot cope with this unprecedented situation, and expect normality, that planning can be able to proceed. I hope that this week the country will take seriously the question of load shedding and say we dedicate a specific utility that is just going to deal with security of supply in regard to electricity, and therefore then we will then put resources and we'll put skilled people from Eskom that will just shift and deal with a new build. Or else we are going to be into this deteriorating state forever.
As far as a split, I mean, government has in the last few years only focused its attention on splitting Eskom into three, basically, which would be generation, transmission, and distribution. But how much of a difference has that made? Because it's still to date not been fully rolled out.
Look, you having one of those divisions is generation with a debt that is making it to suffocate. I think it's still sitting with the 400 billion to repay. And therefore then, even if you're separating those from a financial accountability perspective, the reconfiguration was needed to be done. But from the current situation which we are experiencing, let's leave that, because Eskom's issues in regard to debt, serviceability, and number of problems that they're experiencing cannot again also experience or have the free mind to be able to say, let's address the new generation. And what are they going to address that new generation with? Because the debt is overcapacitated, overcapitalized at Eskom. So no any other lender is willing to put the money there. But when you start a new utility, you're almost starting a new balance sheet that you're going to then finance it from a project finance perspective, not a corporate finance perspective. Then the banks then can come in and we formulate a mechanism and we start taking the economy of this particular country going forward. Because the more load shedding we have, the more jobs we are sharing. And the more jobs we are shedding, we are now creating unemployment as a bigger crisis. And to address that unemployment, you require industries, but you can't have industries if you can't have supply that industry with electricity. Mm-hmm. So we're having this compounded problem that we need to then stop and say a new utility must come, the banks must be called upon on the table, and all of us must agree to support it. Then private sector additionally, depending on which conditions or regulations are we deriving from a procurement perspective. Then we then need to begin to talk about concessions in South Africa. 30 years, the next 30 years, how much concessions do we require in which sector in order to concentrate to bring back the jobs?
Okay.
Then the tax base can expand, and then the government can be able to respond to this situation.
For many of us who are stuck with the load shedding crisis, who, for example, South Africa is a predominantly poor country, people who can't afford a generator and inverter system, those people will tell you that the conversation, in fact, many South Africans will tell you that the conversation around load shedding has got very technical when we start to talk about what needs to be fixed, how many megawatts of power are missing from the grid. How well has Eskom done in communicating the gravity of the situation and just how much work will be needed in order to get us back on a decent footing, if not completely out of this power cuts problem?
You know, load shedding is the demand is bigger than the supply. So you reduce that load by shedding it. Now, an inverter is not a solution to that. And we have tend to, because we are trying to reduce the pain of how much in the darkness can you be able to sit. Is it 2 hours or is it 3 hours? Because once you add an inverter, and then an inverter is like a battery. So it means if your demand, let me make an example and not be technical on this. If your demand was 1 megawatt, now you connect an inverter to charge it over and above that, then you're increasing the demand. So sometimes we are rushing into these things that are called solutions. But those solutions, we are also not anticipating them, because even if you install solar, we call solar installation behind the meter. So Eskom doesn't see that now you have some panels on top of it. They still give the municipality the capacity required by the municipality without realizing. It is only then that comes to your meter, and then there is less demand that is being taken. We need to anticipate that and project to say, Eskom, you're going to end up reducing your capacity because you cannot afford this. Then we will try private sector to install wherever that they can install this, and therefore then we end up knowing But in this particular instance, Eskom is not even clarifying now as to what is its real capacity. I've been always giving this example, and I'm trying to say it very slowly, and saying it's like you are saying that in the morning, South Africa has 1 million taxis. But in the morning, the queues are so much because only 500,000 taxis comes to take the people. The rest of the 500,000 is broken. Eskom must come out very clearly and say, guys, all my old units are now out of line, and I don't have the money to bring them back. So let's try and reduce the demand to 22 giga, if it's 22,000 megawatt. And then the country, we then start deciding where can we be able to bring it down, so that then the load shedding, it's something that is manageable. Currently, it's not manageable. They issue a schedule that says 8 o'clock to 6 o'clock to 8:30. 8:30 is not coming back this day. It's going to come back around 10:30. You can't do that. That's why we are having people becoming angrier and angrier. Because if you tell me that, look, between 8 and 10, this thing is not available, I will gear my plans in accordance to that, whether it's in cooking or it's doing anything or it's boiling the water and all that particular thing. But if you yourself don't honor the schedule, then you are trampling with the feelings and the bid to earn a living in South Africa. So that the new board is in, as the president says, that let's give it a chance. But it took cabinet 2.5 years to put that new board. We are happy that the new board is in. But this obsession of South Africa keeping on saying we will have a 75% availability factor, we won't achieve it. There is no fleet that's going to perform at 75% availability factor.
Thabiso Tenyane, good to speak to you, sir. Thank you very much for your time today.